Yeah, I'll be out of I'll be out of commission for about the next month.
Martins.
Yeah, hang on 1 second.
Yep.
That's Markin. Mark?
Call from unknown.
Oh, hold on. Let me just send it to you. Well, do you have the link, Mark? Yeah, I'll resend it to you right now. Yeah, via email. I've just sent it to you. Okay, the link. Yeah, I just emailed it to you. Got it?
Welcome in everyone who's just recently joined. We'll be getting started here soon. Once Mark joins, we will get started.
No way.
If you would like to utilize our new pullback feature, you can press 7 and a specialist will pull
You're
you
in?
back, maintaining your position in queue.
Oh, you're in. I see it. Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. Just unmute yourself.
Call ended.
All right. Thank God for technology, huh? Here he is. Mark, if you can hear us, you just unmute yourself. That'd be awesome. Stand by. We take care of some technical difficulties. We had him on there.
Audio. Okay, can you hear me now, Paul?
Now we got you.
You can hear me too, right?
Yes.
All right.
Loud and clear. Loud and clear. Mark, welcome. The Golf Anything Podcast webinar. Oh my God. So for all that don't know, for all of you out there, Mark and you and I go back, what, 20 years now?
That's probably about right. Yeah.
Jesus, when you first came to Scottsdale with Hot Stick. So what I love to do is like the program of the webinar is kind of like a little brief history on yourself, because you have an amazing history and the things that you've been doing and with regards to fitting and shafts and so on. And then more importantly, it's like, why get fit? Why bother getting fit? The importance of shafts and equipment. And last but not least, which everybody's kind of on pins and needles, what we all want to know is what are the best drivers and clubs for mid and high handicap. So thanks for coming, man. That's amazing. So why don't you just give us a little bit of brief history? Because I know that you do software engineering and stuff like that, and people don't, there's a lot of people don't even know any of that.
So, yeah, I've been in the golf business probably 30 years. I had a store in Connecticut, which was Custom Golf Connecticut, for 10 years. Moved out here to Arizona in 2000 and opened Hot Sticks, which I had for about 6 years. And then from there, I've been running Cool Clubs for the last 15 almost. But always been into club fitting and all that stuff. Just didn't make sense to me not to fit clubs. To be honest, when I started in 1990, there's very few fittings going on. And I thought by 2000, everybody's got to get fitted. Why not? But it's taken a little longer than that. But certainly, as we've gone through time, more and more people are interested in fitting, and it's definitely something everybody should do, regardless of what level they are. But there's different levels of fitting too, so I'll kind of touch on that later. But yeah, we're Cool Clubs. We do a lot of high-end fittings. We I think it's about 150 tour players we've done work for, PGA Tour only. But even from that to top level amateurs to 35 handicaps. You know, we're very detailed in what we do, and I'll get into some details later. But there's lots, like I said, of levels of fitting. But I've been looking into the technology stuff for years as well. So I'm actually out here at Sunridge, which is our performance and testing center. I'm in one of the bays here, which you can see has cameras all around the walls and stuff. You know, computer systems for everything on the planet. You know, next door there's a robot. We got all our toys out here, so this is kind of our playground, and I'll get into what we do out here as well for testing drivers and robots, and how we test shafts for our S3 machine back at headquarters. But yeah, I kind of think of us more of a technology company than just a retail company. We do have two divisions, right? There's Cool Clubs that has some dozen stores in the US and another couple of dozen all over the world. Then there's S3 Technologies, which is our technology division, and we build loft and line machines and frequency machines. If you go on the PGA Tour trucks, you'll see a lot of the machines are ours actually, and the KBS trucks or the PXG trucks or TaylorMade or whatever. So, you know, we're kind of always striving to be perfect. We never are, but we always try to be.
Yeah, I know you. So I could just, I'm just looking at the wall behind you, and I can see all the speed rail.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
all
all
infrared cameras for gears to do testing and stuff. So yeah, we like our toys.
Yeah. And what kind of got you like thinking about like fitting for the average consumer? I mean, I know that you have access to the tour and how the tour vans fit the players, and go, maybe we should take that to the public. How did that, like, what was the anatomy of that?
Well, I mean, you know, like I played golf in college a little bit, but actually went to school for finance, economics, and computer science, which I remember none of the computer science, but that's all changed. You know, and I worked for a bank for a couple of years, and, you know, in college when I played there was a driving range across the street. The guy tinkered with clubs, a guy named Jim Laudenschlager, actually, he's been around forever. And, you know, I just started understanding how fitting clubs makes a pretty big difference. And I mean, honestly, everybody's not standard. Very few people are actually standard. There's a lot of people that are close to standard, which is why they call it standard. But there's a lot of different sizes and stuff, people and clubs. So, you know, getting those things lined up correctly. You know, basically the tagline that's on our shirt is, you know, play better golf. So we're trying to play better golf. That's our goal, whether you're a 36 handicap or a tour player.
Right.
I will tell you, one of the biggest misnomers in club fitting from the consumer side is that you need to be a really good player to get fitted, you know, at our level or whatever, you know, and that's really not the case. The reality is, give me a 30 handicap, we probably can get in 5 shots. If we're working with a tour player, if we can get a quarter shot around, that's a big check at the end of the month. So, you know, there's definitely bigger benefits for higher handicaps as far as score goes dramatically than there are low handicaps.
And why is that? Why is it that way? I kind of see the tour player because they're so dialed in that, you know.
Right. Well, it's because for a couple of reasons, right? To start with, most higher handicaps have entirely the wrong clubs to begin with, right? So they weren't fitted or whatever, so their clubs don't match their swing, and so they're fighting against them to start. So if you get something close to what they need, that makes a huge improvement. The second thing is, obviously, tour players hit it in the middle of the golf club most of the time. Right. So all the technology as far as how forgiving golf clubs have gotten over the years, and it's, you know, dramatic, obviously, help the higher handicap way more than they do the tour player. So, you know, clubs have made it easier for higher handicaps, and you know, they're generally not fit to begin with. So, you know, decent fitting with one can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I think for me as the average, I'm in that category. As an average consumer, I mean, we get seduced and seducted by these companies that market all these wonderful, all this, you know, the newest technology, newest equipment, and we just go buy it off the rack because we've been marketed to. And we spend the money and then find out that, well, that didn't work.
Yeah, and that's a big shift in the golf business, actually. Probably about 5 or 6 years ago when I went to the trade show. All the OEMs, the Callaways and TaylorMades of the world, and like the Pings and Titleists, which would be the most difficult, all started to get this idea that fitting was super important. And, you know, why is that? Why is it taking them such a long time to come around? That it's so important and really focus on it. Obviously, Ping and Titleists have done that for a long time, but everybody's into it now. And the reason is this, right? So we're kind of at the limit of how far golf clubs could do. So you know, you hear these advertisers, 10 yards longer than last year or 5 yards longer, you know, everybody knows if you added those claims together, we'd all be hitting 1,000 yards by now. That's
Yeah.
not the case, right? So the USGA has limited what we can do as far as golf clubs. So they've limited the size of the head, they've limited the COR, which is how spring effect, how hot it is. They've limited the length of the golf club. And we're doing it again on the PGA Tour. They've limited, you know, a lot of things there. Obviously, the limits on the ball. So we're kind of getting up to the USGA guidelines on what physics will allow, how fast the ball will go, along with the USGA guidelines. So from year to year, the incremental improvements to clubs are just not that big. They're minute. I mean, they get a little more forgiving. They really don't go much further because we're at those limits. So, you know, if you looked at one driver year to year, you might see a half a yard or a yard or something. You know, because we probably gained 40 yards over wood, right, in the last 50 years over wooden drivers, but we haven't gained 400. You know, so, you know, there's just not that much improvement. On the other hand, fitting, if you've got a 10-degree driver and you need an 11-degree driver, that's 15 yards or 10 yards. You know, if you're misfit, you can gain huge amounts of distance. So, you know, in order for people to kind of perpetuate the OEMs keep selling golf clubs every year, they've kind of figured out that, hey, if we fit people every year, their swings change a little and they need new clubs. You know, I certainly can't play with the clubs I did 10 years ago or 20 years ago, or worse yet, the ones I had in college, and play anywhere near as well. So, you know, all the OEMs and everybody in the golf business realizes the future and the reason, the way to get people to play considerably better quick is fitting.
Got it. So let's talk about drivers, because because I think that is probably our biggest, you know, fascination. Like, I want to hit it as far as I can, right? But something you said specifically about the real purpose of getting fit, and you can get into this, is that, you know, I may have a 10.5-degree driver and launch the ball high already, and that may not be a good fit. So, you know, we want to, from what I understand from you, is that, you know, we want an optimal ascending angle and descending angle with the correct amount of spin. And if you can get into that and explain the cause and effect of that, that'd be awesome.
Sure. So, you know, when we look at driver fitting, there's a couple of numbers we really kind of key off on. You know, one is launch angle, how high is it initially taken off of? And if you think about, you know, like a cannonball, if you had no dimples and no spin and stuff, the optimal launch angle is like 45 degrees, right? If you're gonna throw a Hail Mary pass, whatever. But because of spin and the aerodynamics of the ball, whatever, it's somewhere between, you know, it varies per person, right? Because it varies on the conditions and how you swing. But it's somewhere in that, you know, 8 to 18 range, you know, so it's a pretty big range. So, you know, that launch angle's got to be optimized for your swing. The descent angle or land angle is actually a pretty big one. People don't talk about it a lot, but that's what creates roll, right? Everyone thinks I hit it high so it doesn't roll, or I hit it, you know, lower so it rolls more. That doesn't change the height you hit it initially. Doesn't change really how much it rolls. It does, but not a huge amount. But, you know, over 75% of how far it rolls is all determined by spin. Let me explain that a little bit. So as the ball's flying through the air and it runs out and it's spinning a lot, it tends to want to climb. So if you got a lot of spin at the end of the swing, it's still spinning. It kind of goes up and then it just drops because it runs out of energy. If you have the right spin, as it runs out of energy, the spin declines and it comes in more of an angle. So the spin, if you had a lot spinning ball, spinning a ton, it would come straight down. If it's spinning out at all, it's going to go wherever a much more angular direction. But you need some spin to hold it in the air. So everybody has kind of this window of what's optimum for them, and everybody's optimum is different. And I'll explain that a little bit. The reason their optimum is different is they just have a different angle attack and different speeds, right? So you, for instance, Paul, I don't know if you hit up or down on it. I think you're pretty level. You come into it. So a 10-degree driver, if you're level in the shaft end, you're going to launch that at 10 degrees. Me, for instance, I hit up on it 5 degrees because I play with robots all day and figure out that's the optimum. You know, I'm going to hit it much higher. That 10 degree, I'm going to launch it like 15 degrees. So too much. So everybody has an optimum they can get to. TrackMan and Foresight all have these optimizer things. Once they figure out your angle of attack and stuff, they can get pretty close to, you know, figuring out what range you're in. And that's what we're trying to do, optimize all those numbers. If you do that, You know, the difference between a good driver and a bad driver, you know, not fit, even if it's the right shaft and everything, could be 30 yards.
That's a lot.
Oh yeah, it's a real lot.
Yeah,
So
that's
for
3
instance,
clubs.
hit up on at 5 degrees at like 100 miles an hour, and I launched it at 18 and spinning around 2,000 RPMs, which is for, you know, optimum for distance. But I practiced with a launch monitor all day, so that's why I ended up there.
Yeah, we've played
But I
golf
do
together.
play
And I've
golf,
seen.
I do practice using a TrackMan. If you notice on tour now, there's GC quads or TrackMans. Almost every guy out there is doing this. So yeah, there's a lot to optimize, and it can make a huge difference. But you know, that's at a decent level when you're, you know, pretty consistent. You can really optimize that. Higher handicap's a little more difficult. You're never going to optimize super high handicap, but as long as you get something close that they can play with, as they get better, then you can get closer to optimizing.
Yeah, which is so true. We get that, but you know, we I think us avid, you know, we're avid about the game, and we kind of want to have this dispersion, and we call it, you know, you call it dispersion.
Right.
Like from here, we kind of like, you know, can I get it down a little bit more so I can just keep it in play? And that's where the beauty of fitting comes in.
Right, exactly. So there's two things we're talking about. All I was talking about before is all trajectory and how much it spins and all that stuff. And that primarily comes from the head. You know, your launch angle and spin rate and how forgiving it is. We do 9-point testing with a robot. We get it on all over the face. You know, so what I'm traditionally was talking about mostly is, you know, if you hit it straight, you know, what are your optimums? The shaft part is really what gets the right and left done, right? So the shaft is primarily what you're talking about, narrowing that miss hit and stuff.
Yeah.
If you get the shaft right, that's the directional thing. You know, you can get some help from a really forgiving head. Like I said, if you slice it, you get a draw bias club, that can help a lot. But the shaft is really kind of right and left, optimizing the, you know, trajectory and all that is mostly head, although you can adjust, fine tune it with the shaft.
Right.
Right.
So they say that the shafts, so perfect segue to the importance of shafts.
Right.
So they say that the shaft is the engine. I've heard it said the shaft is the engine to the golf club. Like, really?
Yeah, that's a
I mean,
reasonable
like,
comment.
I mean,
Yeah.
and here's one of the peeves that we've had. You know, I've heard mentioned so many times is that I go to a demo day on the course. I try at a club, and typically, but I choose a flex, stiff, regular, or you know, whatever that flex is that I think is for myself. And I have no clue why I'm picking regular or stiff. And now you've moved totally away from the category into frequency.
Yeah.
And it's like I remember, like, why am I hitting my 8-iron so good, and then my 7-iron is just feels totally different.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it, obviously. You know, what we kind of really try to do, whether it's a tour player or 30 handicap, is at least have all the clubs in the set have similar flexes and similar weights. It makes some sense, right? So in general, the driver's your lightest shaft, you're just trying to swing it the fastest. So also your stiffest shaft, because again, you're trying to swing a shaft fastest. And as it goes down through the set, they should get just a little softer. And usually a little heavier, because the heavier shafts you can control better. So like for me, for instance, I got a 50-gram driver, 65-gram fairway wood, 80-gram hybrids, 90-gram irons, and 120-gram wedges. But it's all kind of one part of a set. They all, you know, match. That's a big deal. If you got different clubs that are totally different in your set, you're going to struggle with some of them. So the first thing we do in a fitting is actually measure all your clubs and see what you've got. And typically we can point out stuff like, you know, your 8-iron doesn't go that far, right? Because it's the same vault as a 7-iron, or, you know, which one do you like? Is one of the first questions we ask. And then we look at the list to see why, right? Whether it's close. But yeah, really important to get the shafts figured out right. And there's a lot of different options, you know, from steel to graphite to lightweight and all those kind of things.
And that's the beauty about getting fit. You can try all those different combinations of shafts in order to optimize your ascending angle, especially with irons. It's a totally different, because you want and spin, because you don't want the ball to descend at a very low angle, because you want it to hit the green and stop, right, as best you can.
Irons and stuff, yeah, you want that high angle.
Yeah.
Stopping. Driver, you want the opposite, right? So they're all a little different.
Right.
Yeah, shafts are a pretty big part of it. But you know, shafts aren't everything. People say the shaft's the most important part of the club. Well, if you got the wrong head, I don't care how well you optimize the shaft, you're struggling against it. So we get people sometimes come in, I got 8-degree head, I want to hit a little higher, you know, can I get a shaft that hits it higher? Yes, but it's better to get a 9-degree head and then fine tune than it is to try and, you know, adjust the loft with the shaft.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you see like a lot of these drivers now, well, let's stick on shafts because there's so many choices out there for shafts, right? There's a lot of choices. And the beautiful thing about getting fit with Cool Clubs is, you know, you've narrowed it down. I mean, your team and your knowledge of the shafts and equipment, makes it so easy for the consumer to go, you know, to get fit with you guys because you have all this experience, 20 years of it. It's like you already know how to dial it in real fast.
Yeah. So, yeah, and it's a really difficult thing. Like I said, you know, it's great to say, and I don't, you know, depends on how you count, to be honest with you, it's that creative accounting. You know, do you have 30,000 demos or 50,000 demos or 20,000 demos, you know, whatever it is, it's a huge number. I mean, it's great to have a big selection, but the reality is people run out of steam really quick. So if you can't figure it out in the first half hour of hitting balls, they start getting fatigued and then your whole thing goes out the window.
So explain that for a second, because I don't think people quite maybe understood that yet.
Yeah.
They run out of steam. So person comes in there fresh up, you know, they're fresh. I mean, they wake up, they're good, right? And how many balls do you want them to hit? Like,
well, that's the thing, right? So the more data you get, the better job you can do to find the best one. So you want to hit as many as you can, but you're limited to at some point in time, they start getting tired and those swings start getting bad, and that's bad data and that's no good. That doesn't help.
Right.
So the trick and the reason we do so much research, and we do a ton of research, which we're going to start doing a podcast series on some of the stuff we're doing shortly. I'll do a plug on that real quick, but if you go to coolclubs.com and sign up for our newsletter, we'll be doing something similar to this starting monthly, but on specific topics, whether it's drivers, spin, or whatever. And it's all based on research we do. And the reason we do all this research is to try to narrow that down, right? So, you know, when you take a couple of swings on your handicap and what you're doing with your current driver, our guys can look in the database and say, all right, we're looking for pretty forgiving drivers that launch high, that don't spin much. And we can narrow it down to 3 clubs really quick. If you go into a fitting and you're hitting 12 different drivers, you are wasting your time. There's just too many clubs and you're going to get tired, and then the data gets all goofy and it's very difficult. So, you know, that's all the research we do is just to try and narrow down what the clubs are to begin with. Then we can do a better job fitting.
And that's the typical experience that people get when they go to some kind of golf store to buy, you know, they're not, you know, even
you like one.
Yeah. Which would be like, right?
Yeah, you got to get a little lucky, right? So if there's 50,000 demos or whatever, and even if you got drivers, if you got 100 options, good luck hitting 100 drivers to see which one's the best. The only chance you got, that best one happens to be in the beginning when you're warmed up, you know?
Yeah.
Before you're tired and after you're warmed up, so you got a window. So
I mean, I just believe I'm absolutely convinced because I have this conviction that if you're an avid golfer and you aspire to play better golf and you are such a aficionado, or not necessarily aficionado, but like want to play good golf, why would you not want to get fit properly? Why would you take the chance of getting a golf club off the rack? And then they give you the options nowadays with all the brands. You can just choose upgraded shafts.
There is zero reason not to get fit to some extent. Okay. Right. You know, and you can do it for nothing and be better off than doing nothing at all. And there's different levels of it. At the very minimum, if you're a new golfer and you're looking for clubs and stuff, probably the easiest, best way is if you look on Ping's fitting chart, they've been doing this for a million years. It's a static fit. It measures your hand to floor, the size of your hands, and all that stuff. As a beginner, that's a decent start. And that's what we do in our beginner fitter. You know, you like to look at this one or that one, but at least you're going to get the right size for your body and you can start learning to play golf. I would obviously say, you know, more fitting is better. But at the very minimum, find out all your sizing, and I would use Ping as probably the best reference. They do the most research on that, and they've been doing it for 50 years. But it's a pretty good overall judgment just based on your static size.
Right.
You know, from there you can go to, you know, fittings at PGA Superstore, the Worldwide Golfs and all that stuff. And some of those guys are pretty good and they got launch monitors. So, you know, that's a step above. Obviously, you're going to get a little more dialed in. Hopefully you get somebody who knows what they're doing. I would definitely ask around in your area and see who had good experiences. That would be a good way to do it. And you can look at those kind of fittings. That's another option. You know, even your club pro who's got a couple of fitting carts, if he's any good at it, will give you a pretty good idea of clubs. So you know, any type of fitting is better than none at all. You just want to kind of avoid the situations where the guy's heavily commissioned and just trying to force and sell you something. That to me is a bit of a, you know, a warning sign, right?
Sure. But in addition to that, it's like, okay, so now we got fit for equipment, right? And shafts and,
Yep.
But one of the things that happens at fitting is, and we've had questions that wanted to be asked on this, is the gaps of between each club.
Right.
I mean, you want to have a certain gap between, you know, your 5-iron, 6-iron, and all the way down from your, especially your wedges, right? You want to have a certain yardage between
Absolutely.
clubs, right? You don't want to
Yeah.
have a 5-year difference. So go into that a little bit.
Yeah, well, so that's part of the whole set thing we're looking at. So like, I'll use my set as an example because it makes this easier for me to remember. But you know, you want to have all the different distances put out. And the idea that you should have 10 yards between clubs really doesn't make any sense, right? So you only get 14 clubs. And if I can hit the ball 275 yards, you know, 10-yard increments, even starting at 80 yards, that doesn't get me anywhere. It gets me 180, not 280.
Right.
So everybody's got a different spread of how that is. You know, in my case, I've got a lob wedge that goes, you know, 75, a sand wedge that goes 100, pitching wedge that goes 125, you know, all the way up. And not any big gaps. My longest hybrid goes 230, three-way goes 245, 250, and driver goes longer than that. So I don't know big gaps. But you know, everybody's a little different, but you really gotta look at that. Best way to do that for a high, you know, a good golfer is to actually do like a TrackMan combine where you try to hit 4 shots of each. You know, tries to save 3 of each and it takes an average and gives you all the spreads, which is great. I will tell you that is for a low handicap golfer. I'm a pretty good 5 or 6 and it wears me out. It's hard to go through the whole bag and hit 3 good shots with each club. Starts off real easy with wedges, but as you get up to the 3-irons and 5-irons and stuff, not so easy.
Right.
So it's definitely a better level, but you should have some idea how far all these clubs go. That's a really important part to scoring a game. And I think most people think they hit it longer than they do, which is probably good for most handicaps because there's less trouble in front of the greens than there is over. But you know, knowing those distances is a big advantage.
And that's true. And I think, like you said, you know, if you don't have the opportunity to get into like, you know, like to see how far each club goes, because it can be taxing.
Right.
The thing about getting fit though, also, is that at least you look at the lofts of the clubs,
Right.
right? At least
Yeah.
you can have some kind of control that way
Sure.
of distance management between the, you know, each iron and wedges.
Yeah, you can manipulate that some too. For instance, like
Right.
in my set, I'll bring up, this is easy, like I said, my pitching wedge is actually weak. So I play a 48-degree pitching wedge, which is 3 degrees weaker than standard. Because I don't want to hit it that far because it fills the gaps. Whereas my 4-iron is actually 2 degrees strong. So throughout the set, my 7, 6-iron is probably about standard because I'm trying to spread out those distances. So that's not an uncommon thing to do. You know, have more than 3 or 4 degrees between some clubs because that's what it takes to make a difference. In general, though, I'll tell you something that most people don't know. You know, everybody says, well, I want 4 degrees between clubs or 3 degrees between these clubs. In general, just as an idea, you generally want smaller degree changes in the longer clubs, so between the 3 and the 4. And there should be bigger changes in the wedge 9s and that and there. So in my set, between my 4-iron and 5-iron, there's 4 degrees, say. And then there's 4 degrees between the next one, and then obviously as I get to you know, lob wedges and stuff, there's actually 5 degrees. So I have 54 rather, 59 and 48-degree pitching wedge, 5 degrees between. So, and the reason for that is basically this, right? So 5 degrees difference is about 10% of 50 degrees, where in a 3-iron, it's just, 25 degrees, or 5-iron, 4 degrees is about 10%. And as you get 2 irons and you go to 3 degrees. So that degree
Oh, okay.
change,
Oh,
right,
so,
should
so
actually go up. There should be a
got it.
bigger change in degrees in short irons than the long
It's-
ones to get you the same change distance.
So you're referring to the loft of the iron at
Yeah.
like a 4-iron is like 19, whatever it is, like 21 degrees or 20,
Right.
something like that. That's the loft of the iron. That's like that, right?
Yeah.
And versus the loft of a wedge, it's 60, right?
Right.
So if you're looking at a 10% change
6 degrees
from
more.
20,
Yeah.
yes.
It's not
yeah.
necessarily 10% exactly, but it definitely, it works that way. You'll see, and the maximum we really want to see just overall is, I really don't see any tour players, whatever, any more than about 6 degrees between clubs.
Got it.
As a general rule, you don't much more than 6 degrees between the clubs.
Yeah, somebody was just
Anyway,
asking. So
because it's too big a gap, right? It's hard to hit really short shots.
yeah, think
Um,
about that, right?
Right.
If you think of like somebody was just asking about hybrid, like rescue clubs or hybrids. Well, think about it. Like you have 19 degrees and then you have a 22 degree, which is like almost about 10%, right? 8%, whatever that is. That's like just a small
Yeah.
change, right? Yeah, like a three degree difference. And so that sounds right. And I think, I'd love to hear your take. One of the things that consumers risk by getting clubs off the rack from a store where they don't get fit is the loft and lies don't necessarily get checked, and that could just totally mess you up.
Yeah, I mean, if you stick with one brand from Sandwedge through all the clubs, your lofts will be pretty good, right? They were designed that way, plus or minus a degree, and the lofts in that particular set are good. If you go, for instance, to buy a set of ping irons and you buy bulky wedges, you might end up with a big gap between the pitching wedge and the first, bulky thing. So you got to kind of watch for that.
Right.
But the lie angle part, which is how the club interacts with the ground, that's a different thing. That's really right and left. Like when we talk about drivers, the shaft is right and left. Well, shaft a little bit in this case too. But the lie angle basically makes the ball go more right or left. And what we're looking for here is if you have a golf club, you're really looking for it to hit the ground pretty flat. If the toe digs, it tends to twist and open the face up and you hit it right. The opposite is true. If the heel digs, it tends to close this way and it goes left. The other thing happens if you've got a shaft running through this thing, call it a shaft this way, as you make a club flatter, the target line goes right. As you make it more upright, the target line goes left. So pretty important to get that part correct. And you can do a simple check on that too. If you look on a drive, people use lie boards, they put a board down, put a piece of tape on. But if you look at your divots when you're playing, good way to start. If they're much deeper on one side than the other, you probably ought to check your loft and lies.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's like something to ignore, or not necessarily to ignore, but people don't pay attention to, like, it's just a lie, right? But at a micro level and macro, right, how much it can affect the left and right dispersion at 150 yards out.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I actually did the math on it. Tom Mace, the scientist who works for us, would probably tell me exactly or could figure it out. But essentially, I remember looking at this years ago, and 2 degrees off on a 5-iron, which used to be what we fit for demos, right?
Right.
With some, 14 yards offline.
14 yards?
Offline. Yeah, so if you change the lie angle by 14, just 10 yards, but if you're off a bunch. And if you got a whole set where some are upright and some are flat, and they're going right and left and back and forth, then you're really in a mess. So getting the lie at least consistent and close to what you need is super critical, or you're going to struggle with your swing. So beginners, people just starting, they got to get that right, or they're really going to struggle.
Right, because you go from, this dispersion that we're talking about can be so impacted just by the lie of the golf club. Never mind all the other.
It's a simple thing to check, loft and lie. It's not very expensive. You do need to find someone who's got a good machine who knows what they're doing. It's very easy to mess up, but it's it's something that's kind of critical to really playing good golf. I will tell you, some of the guys on tour check their loft and lies weekly.
Weekly.
Weekly. Yeah.
But it's one of those things
they
that
hit a lot of balls. They're generally playing forged clubs, which are softer, which bend easier over time. But you know, a half degree off is a couple of yards, and you know, that's the difference between being in a bunker or you're next to the pin. You know, it could be, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, these guys. They're so precise. Not such a big
Right.
deal for the average guy, but it certainly can make a big difference if they're way off. And that's something that's easy to check, doesn't cost much, and can make a huge difference.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking about this, right? It's one of those things that are probably really overlooked as the lie.
Yeah.
But it plays such an important role. Now, if a tour player who is already so good, pretty dialed in, and they check it, you know, almost on a weekly basis, how much will it impact the average golfer? Tremendous.
No, I mean, not really. So, you know, if a tour player, if you're off a half degree or something like that, you know, that's a pretty big deal. I mean, you could be 3 yards short or something on a
Right.
hole, like I said, be in a bunker rather than next to the pin. As a high handicap, you know, that tiny little difference, they got other issues going on. They might not hit solid or whatever else. So not as critical, right? But if they're not close, now you're struggling against the clubs and you're trying to change your swing and you'll never get better. So they at least need to be consistent and close to what you need, or you're going to
Right.
struggle a lot, right?
And one of the things that is fascinating, and one of the things as well is, so it just came to my head and I had it written down, is what is, Mark, but the importance of swing weight? Is it important, or is it just myth, or is it just nonsense, or do we have to, or does that need to be paid attention? Now, I'm saying this, and is because I know for a fact that when you build clubs, each head is weighed.
Yeah.
And then you have a certain weight, make sure there's a certain difference of weight between each iron in some kind of
Yeah.
curves. Anyways, I'm speaking out of my,
Yeah, no, swing weight is a really interesting thing, and it's a big can of worms, to be honest with you.
so what is swing weight, first of all? Like, explain it so that
Swing
people
weight is
understand.
just a measurement of how heavy the head feels in relation to the rest of the club. So a million years ago, this guy came up with an idea of weighing it by putting a beam on it across. It's 14 inches from the beam, and it measures how head relative is the head is to the other end of the club, right? So it's a feel issue.
So when we take the club back, we have this sensation, this
Yeah,
feel of
it's a
something.
sensation of how much weight you feel on the end is essentially what swing weight is, right? Relative to the rest of the club. That being said, it is not the most important thing on the planet, and it can be totally misunderstood.
Okay.
So say you got a guy that's got big hands, right? And he puts a mid-size or a jumbo grip on it. Well, that club that was D2 is now C8 because of the grip.
Mm-hmm.
Did you really change the weight on the end of the club? No, it's the same head, the same swing weight, the same head weight, mass, and everything. All you change is the grip, which is under your hands. So should you make it D2 and make the swing weight super heavy or not? Not necessarily, right? So, and ladies' clothes being shorter, being lighter at C5 or 6 or whatever is actually okay. Swing weight is somewhat like frequency. What you want is some consistency, right? So if you've got one iron that's D2, well, let's make them all similar so you can swing them the same. That's more important than whether they're D1 or D2. And we do this to people too. We get people all the time. I gotta have D2. D3 is way too heavy for me. And we have in our shop actually like 5 clubs. On the scale, one is like B0, which is 20 flexes below D2. C0, E0, and F0, and huge ranges, and most people can't tell them apart.
I did that test with one of the tour guys. Yeah, I did it with and he goes,
might get
okay,
close. If you can't tell them between 10 swing weights, how can you tell them between one?
Yeah.
People can't. So the important thing really is to make the whole set consistent. So what we use swing weight for is really making it consistent. In general, though, I typically like, driver a little heavier because he gets such a light shaft, so he gets some head weight. My driver's like D5. Fairway wood somewhere in the middle, one's like D3. Iron somewhere else. My irons are a little bit heavy. I like D3. And my wedge is a little heavier. So typically you'll see the wedges be a little heavier swing weight than the rest of the set. That's fine because you grip down on them in different shots. It's heavier. You're not looking for distance. And generally the driver tends to be a little heavier because the shaft's so light. So you have some feeding. But other than that, all your clubs in your set should be at least similar, right? So like I said, mine going from D5 is my driver. The heaviest clubs I got are like D9, which are my wedges. But they're all within 5 swing weights, and they all go progressively heavier as they go down. What you don't want is super heavy in one club, super light in another. Then you got to swing differently, and going from swing to swing, it's difficult. So we use swing weight kind of as a way to match the set, but definitely being D2 exactly or C9 exactly, that's relative to the length of the club and the grip and a bunch of other things. It's the same thing with frequency, right? We want all the clubs to be within some range of frequency and have make some sense, but it's not the end all. My driver's 7.0, my fairway width's 6.0 on the old FM scale. But they're different weights, different characteristics. They all feel similar. So getting a set that matches or all your clubs somewhat the same, that's a pretty big deal. You don't want to be having one club or 2 clubs in your bag that are totally different than everything else, because it just messes up your swing and trying to be consistent.
Right. That's wonderful insight there. How about, should we get fit for wedges?
Yeah, your wedges, the shafts and stuff should somewhat match your irons. Like I said, they could be a little heavier, and if anything, a little softer because you don't swim as hard. Absolutely for gaps on different distances. Like I said, I hit mine 75, 100, and 125 are my gaps. You want the right gaps, and the other big thing is bounce, actually. So that's how the club interacts with the ground, and that's pretty dramatically different. There's a pretty big range of bounces, down to almost nothing, 2 or 3 degrees bounce, up to 15 degrees or even more in some cases. And that's a pretty important part to get fit for people. As a general rule, if you hit down on it a lot hard, you'll notice that because you tend to take pretty big divots. You want more bounce because they want to stop the club. Bounce basically stops the club from digging into the ground, right? It bounces off the ground instead of digs in. And a wider sole obviously affects it. I can explain that a little bit on what bounce means or what effective bounce is. I'll explain that in a second, actually. It's pretty
Sure.
important. But yeah, in general, like I take very little divots. So I use relatively low bounce wedges. But yeah, getting that at least basically fit to some extent, even if you don't try them all. But if you know your steep, get higher bounce wedges. The other thing that comes into play on picking wedges out is really conditions you play in. We're out in Arizona, everything's hard. We got no rough to speak of. It's a whole different deal if you're in the Northeast where the fairways are soft and spongy and the club digs in really easily. Different conditions obviously dictate different ones. And some tour players actually switch heads and switch wedges based on some conditions. Again, you don't have to be perfect as a 30 handicap, but if you got a low bounce wedge and you're steep, you're definitely hurting yourself.
Yeah, but that's why with the importance of getting fit. I mean, the manufacturers do an amazing job of confusing me.
Yeah.
And I mean, especially with wedges, they have all these grinds now. Like, when did this come? When did this become a thing? Grinds.
Well, it hasn't been.
When
I started some 30 years ago in Connecticut, we started grinding bulky wedges. We would do all different grinds and stuff.
Okay. So, sorry. Why? What's the purpose of a grind? Like, you grind. Okay. That's somebody looking for something in a wedge, like.
Yeah, different grinds do different things, right? So the grind basically is a way of adjusting the club, more bounce or less bounce, and how it interacts with the turf. So different grinds, some grinds are better for people that are not so steep to kind of pick the ball, and different grinds are better, or more bounce is better for people hit down on it more. So there are lots of different grinds out there, and yes, it is confusing.
Right.
I think Titleist in just one loft has probably 5 different bounces. Which is a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I remember just like, if you wanted to grind back then, like, let's go back like 20 years ago. Like, I mean, I used to grind some wedges too back in the day, but not like you guys. But they were grinding because, the wedge is like this, and and the player wanted to have it open like this, but have a certain look at it, right? So he'd grind off the heel, right? So that he could open up the face.
Let me quickly grind that wedge and show you a little bit. Got my golf clubs here. It's Friday. I'm gonna hit the balls today.
Nice.
So yeah, I do grinding on my own wedges, for instance. This is kind of a strange one. This is like a double grind. So I play very little bounce, right? Because I pick it clean. So In actual fact, if you looked at this from here to here, and you drew a line across the bottom, this has very, very little bounce. Right.
Yeah, that has.
You look at it like that.
Yeah.
Very, very little bounce if you keep it straight. But what it's got is this big groove in here. Let's see if we can see it. Let's see.
I did notice it before. Yeah, all right, go ahead.
Yeah, there you go.
You
Got this
see it
big
there.
groove in here, and this bounce is like 15 degrees. So if it starts getting into the ground, this kind of helps me. So I kind of use it because I pick it clean. I don't, no bounce off most conditions. But when I get into soft sand and stuff like that, I just don't want the puck digging. So that's what that does, which is a little different. We do a whole bunch of stuff for tour players. We do a lot of grinding for tour players and stuff, but for the average player off the rack, like I said, there's 5 different bounces from Volky. So you can find one that works pretty well.
Right. And yeah, it's just fascinating. And more, and how about this now? Now that we've got like through the clubs, like your drivers, your rescues, and we didn't really talk a whole lot about rescue clubs, hybrids, but irons and wedges. Any benefits of getting fit for a putter?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. This blows my mind, right? So, and you can share all this information. How many putts? How many times we use a putter versus any other club in our bag, and it's the one that we ignore the most for getting fit.
That's a huge thing for me, to be honest. I would say, and not many people do it well because there's not much money in it, really. Think about it. You do a driver fitting, drivers are $500. You do a putter fitting, when we sell drivers, probably 90% of the time we do fittings because it's better than the one they got. Putters, we probably only sell 20% of the time because the putter they got is probably pretty close. They bought a few of them. They kind of like that one. I'd say we probably 75% of the time we adjust it, make it longer, shorter, change the line and stuff, but it's obviously not. But as far as your score goes, is the single most important thing you can do. We get people call up all the time, I want to come out to Arizona, I want to do a fitting, I want to do driver fitting, irons, and we ask them, do you want to do a putter fitting? No, I'm a good putter, I don't need to do that. And my answer to that is, so is Aaron Badley, we see him once a month. Right? So you can get dramatically better score results by getting a little better on putting. And people don't even take lessons on putting, which is beyond me. It's the easiest thing to fix by far.
Right. But okay, so so I buy a putter off the shelf, right? Because I just buy by preference of how it looks and how it feels. No, I buy for no other reason than that.
Right.
I mean, I'm talking about the consumer. I'm a little bit different. So yeah, and so we just spend $400 on a Scotty Cameron putter, and then we try it on the green at the store.
It may work, right? It may not.
Right, and then we
don't know.
And then we just take it and go, damn putters, like
right.
We go buy another putter.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's a lot of people got putters in their closet, that's for sure.
Right.
Because if you go into a store and you play around with one and you happen to make more with that putter, you think that one's better, and it probably is better than the other ones you didn't make the putt with, obviously. But is it the best one? Does it fit exactly right to you? Probably not. The only thing we try not to do any teaching. We work with a ton of teachers from all over the place, and honestly, if that's a hard job, I'm happy to leave them with that job. Teaching the full swing, but we do in our putter fitting do a lot of teaching, at least explaining to people things so they understand what's going on.
I'd love to hear a little bit about that. Like, I mean, like the club face coming back to school, or however you can explain it. Yeah.
Basically, we look at a whole bunch of things. The single biggest thing that most amateurs are terrible at, which is easy to fix, is just posture. Right? They have no idea how they're setting up to the ball. Most amateurs stand very upright, which means the shoulders rotate very much like this, which means the face opens and closes a lot.
Okay, so there's a cause and effect of that, because if you're upright and you're rotating your shoulders this way,
it opens right a bunch.
It
so
opens
you need to be
right.
more bent over for as anything. I mean, I would say, if you can watch and here's the thing too, you can actually play it. You can putt as well as Tiger Woods or Rory McIlroy. You certainly don't have the physical ability to hit the balls far, but you do have the physical ability to putt as well. Everybody does.
Sure.
Right? I mean, some of you are more coordinated than others, but you don't need to be 6'8" and have flexibility and swing 130 miles an hour. So it's the one thing that's kind of a level playing field. It's also the one thing that's much easier to change in a swing. It's only moving, 2 feet. It's not moving very fast. If I told you in a putting thing to stand, 6 inches further away from the ball, you could and still hit it solid. If I told you to stand 6 inches further away with a driver, you'd be lucky if you could hit the ball, if not fall over, right? So a way harder thing to change. So we do a little teaching and get the setup correct in putting, because I just feel we have to. But
So
yeah,
what is it that you're trying to fit for? Is it like the rotation of the head that we want to minimize? Or I mean, some people, I know that we have heel center shafted putters, we have heel shafted putters, and you have plumb neck, have all these variations of these styles, right? So what is like what are we trying to alter? Now, some people take the club straight back and forth. That's kind of the way to do. Some people have this rotation. So that's really where you kind of dial in, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, one thing is to, first of all, people don't even know what they do. Right? We put them on a bunch of cameras, they can see it. Now they understand. They're way ahead of the game now. If you just understand what you're doing. And you can do something about it. There's not a right or wrong way to putt. We see a couple of different basic ways of putting. We kind of call it straight back and straight through, or close to that. There's one way inside and down the line, like a Batley does. There's actually a yellow thing that I think is called inside and down the line. That works. And most of them we see slightly inside to inside, which makes sense because your fulcrum is away from it. So at some point in time, you take it back far enough, it's got to go inside. And at some point in the fair follow through, it's got to go inside. So that's the most common stroke we see. But what we're really trying to fit for is what putter at what length and what thing can he get back to square at impact. Square to the target line. That is 90% of putting. A friend of mine from Duke did this huge study on, what makes putts go in versus not. And basically like 88% was like having the face square at impact. Like 8% was, path, right? Outside in, inside out. And, 2% or whatever, the angle of attack changes it, or where you're in the face and stuff. So in general, having the face square at impact is 90% of it. If you're not in the center, you get more forgiving putter, you're still pretty good. So it's how do we do that? Some people rotate the putter in and it opens a lot, and closes. So they want a heel shafted putter that helps. But what we want when the ball gets hit, it's here.
Right, square.
Right, square. That's the most important thing. So that if we get that fixed, everything else is kind of fine tuning. You get the ball square to the thing, and some people line some putters up better for visual effects. Some people like a long line. Some people don't do well with lines. It just depends. But we can measure all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is make sure it's right loft, so you get the right rolls. And that's consistency of distance, which is pretty big actually.
Okay.
Not having the right loft on a putter is a big problem.
Question regarding putting. So, with respect to score, right?
Yeah.
On tour, right? On tour, what's the average putts per round for a tour player?
Not actually sure. I'm guessing it's somewhere around 30.
30. And for an amateur?
I'm guessing probably more like 40. You got 10 shots there.
Okay, like, and it could be 30, right? Because
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of people don't like to count all those putts, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, so in the range of say 35 putts is probably average for amateurs, right?
Oh, yeah.
If I could shave 5 strokes just in putting from getting the right putter, that could be an 84 to a 79.
Absolutely. It makes a massive difference. Massive difference. And the reason we spend so much money in our putting studios and our one of headquarters now, Floor Moves has got tracking of the ball, TrackMan, cameras all around it, and it's over $100,000 or a couple $100,000 actually of information for something we don't make much money on, right? So we don't sell that many putters comparatively to drivers. But the way I look at it is we're trying to make people play better golf, as it says here, and that is a huge part of it. So we get a guy comes in, for instance, might buy a set of clubs that were $3,000 or something, not expensive. And he didn't even buy a putter. We just adjusted it, changed the grip. But he goes out and shoots 5 shots lower. Hell, 3 or 4 of those could have come from putting. He doesn't care. He's happy. That's what we want is happy customer. Get him to shoot lower scores no matter how we can. The putting's a massive part about that.
It's so over.
It's half of your swings on the golf course, right?
Yeah.
It's the easiest one to fix and get better at.
But we don't pay.
Restricted by your physical limitations, so you can putt that. I can putt as good as some tour players do.
Yeah, I mean, we are so
We're
Like-
overlooking it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, well, thanks to all the marketing, all the marketing behind all the brands. What do they sell? Drivers and like,
Right.
I mean, they sell you distance like like there's nobody's business, right?
Yep.
Maximum distance, but yet putters are so overlooked. But that's your biggest
Yeah,
potential
like
to score better.
If I tell somebody, that wants to come into pool clubs and they want to do one fitting and they're 20 handicap or whatever, I said, do a putter fitting. I would rather you're going to get better scoring results of doing a putter fitting than you are doing the rest of your clubs. I can almost guarantee that, unless you're a really good putter, which is unlikely.
So last but not least, something that we all want to know, especially me, I do, because I'm a junk, I'm a junkie for like tech junkie as well. Equipment. You do so much testing, right? And I think if there is controversy, I don't even know, but from what marketing, the advertising tells us to data, I mean, we are so hooked on what's the best driver of the year. And, we can go down this rabbit hole for a long time. What's the best irons? And anyway, with drivers, because everybody wants to know drivers, we want speed, we want distance. What has been your best, if you could categorize in any way that you wish, the best drivers for
Well, I mean, it's kind
2022?
of interesting, right? So to start, I'll tell you what we do to test drivers. We test them pretty much before they come out. So we'll start testing Titleist in another week or so.
Wait a second, you have privileges that getting all the equipment before?
No,
the
as
general-
soon as we get stuff, sometimes we get stuff early, sometimes we don't, but we'll get it as early as we get them.
Of course you do.
Very early.
Why? Yes, of course you do.
But we basically do a full gamut of testing on every club that comes out. So we base most of our testing at 95 miles an hour because that's the average customer we got. But we test from 65 miles an hour up to 120. And what we do basically is we put every driver through the same, a bunch of other tests, but the main test we do is at 95 miles an hour, 0 angle attack, 0 path, dead center, and then we hit 9 points on the face. So we go, 3/4 inch to the toe, to heel, up and down, and all over the face. And what we find from that is, how much spin drivers create, how forgiving they are, where they go when you hit them on the toe or the heel. And honestly, all the drivers these days are pretty damn good. We just test the top brands. We're going to start testing some other ones and some necessarily less expensive ones that may actually be pretty good. There's some less expensive options, but they're all pretty damn good, right? Nobody's coming out with bad clubs. But there are certainly some that are better in certain categories than others. So there is no clear that's the best driver this year. It depends on the person, right? So
Okay.
The difference, right? So the 2 top drivers this year are obviously Callaway and TaylorMade. And
Which TaylorMade? The Stealth?
the Stealth TaylorMade and the Callaway Rogue, the new one,
Okay.
right?
And the new Callaway Rogue.
And your Callaway.
But
Titleist
okay,
was
so
next. Titleist came out
just
a year before, it came out a while ago. This last Titleist was the best one. It was actually tested at the time, one of the best drivers we've ever tested. It still is one of the top drivers, which is unusual. We sold a ton of Titleist drivers last year, and not just the
Wow.
good players. It was good all around, which typically you wouldn't see. Most retail stores, we're probably 20% Titleist or something or more. Most retail stores would be close to that because they probably don't realize it happened to be a really good club that year. But this year, the 2 big winners were the Callaway and the TaylorMade, obviously. They're different, right? They've each got 3 models. So they've got, there's tour model of some extent. They've got some standard model in the middle, and then they've got a draw bias model to some extent to help people pick slices. What's surprising to me is we don't sell more draw bias drivers because I think more people need them than have them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they do actually work, but some work more than others, right? So we actually do another test where we hit a dead square and see how far left it goes. That's how
No
much
way.
draw bias it's got in it. Yeah.
And is
So-
it true? Are they
Oh,
really
yeah.
draw biased? They
Some
do-
more than others, some a little bit, some a lot,
Wow.
Ping did an interesting test, and they're really good at testing. Look at those results. They've got these sensors on their clubs, Arcos, which tells you where the ball goes, and they've been collecting data on that for the last couple of years. What they determined was, our draw bias driver, they're still hitting it right. We need to make more draw bias. So,
No way.
yeah, so I'm guessing that's the case for all companies.
Yeah.
You can't make it too draw bias for some people. But in general, I would say those are the two top drivers. I would say TaylorMade edged Callaway a little bit on distance or ball speed. You know, this new carbon fiber face really did give, some really good ball speed numbers. But then can Callaway kind of beat them a bit on forgiving and lower spin? So it kind of depends on the person. And
Right.
within those two brands, you got 3 different models. So
And one of the things that I've heard over time with regards to drivers is the important, besides personal preferences, right? The way it looks, the way it sits at the ground, maybe the color, is the sound
yep.
it makes when it hits the ball. Now, talking about that, I mean, like, so I know for a fact that, for me personally, it's like I hit 2 drivers and go, oh, I like this one for some reason, and not really knowing why the reason.
Right.
And it's the sound that it makes, because it has this association of me hitting a good drive,
Right. Yep.
right? If you
Yeah,
do
it's
that,
kind of interesting. So how do you determine which driver? So I would say the majority of our fittings, myself included, matter of fact, I got a Callaway and a TaylorMade, and I can't tell which one I hit those. It depends on the day. They're almost identical. But there's a couple of things we look at for which driver you end up picking. And obviously, we look at all the statistical data, which one fits you the best, right? Spin, launch, and all that. But then there's this kind of unquantitatable number. What do you like the look and feel of?
right?
And that's what it comes down to, right? So like I said, all these manufacturers make pretty good clubs. So almost every fitting we got comes down to 2 drivers that are, almost identical as far as performance goes. And then it comes down to which one the guy likes the look and feel of. And,
Right.
Look is totally subjective, and feel comes from 90% sound.
Well, that's amazing, because you have all these brands that are out there that make drivers. At least we've narrowed it down to like 2 that are somewhat so close and similar.
Yep.
And then we get to choose what preferences we like as a
I would
golfer.
say that happens in the vast majority of our fittings. It comes down to 2 drivers, and that's kind of a toss a coin. What do you like the look and feel of?
Well,
And that's in our fittings the only time maybe the brand preference, or I like Rory McIlroy, I want a TaylorMade, kind of comes
Sure.
into play. We try to leave that to the end, where it doesn't really make much difference. They're both
Right.
really good. We certainly don't want to start the whole fitting with the guy who definitely wants to try this Callaway 8-degree head and 20 handicap that it's down on it. This is not going to work.
Right. And how about rescue clubs? Is it now? Let me ask you. Let's 2 things. I have a 2-part question. So rescue clubs,
Right.
and then is there a movement that more now the 3-iron, the 4-iron are coming back in the bag?
Yeah.
Or
Driving irons maybe a little bit.
or fairway woods?
Yeah, so what we do in our fittings, actually, we call a long game fitting, right? So the longest iron you have, all the way to the driver. So is that fairway woods? Is it hybrids? Is it a combination of those? There's a lot of different, ways to do that. As far as when you should start going into hybrids from irons, use the longest iron you're comfortable and hit well. At that point, you should go to a hybrid. Now that might be a 6 hybrid, or even a 7 hybrid in some cases. Alice Cooper, I play with now and then. I think he's got a pitching wedge hybrid. He loves them all. So don't be afraid to have a 5 hybrid in your bag, or have a lot of hybrids, because if you look on the LPGA tour or even the senior tour, they got a lot of hybrids. I mean,
Do they really?
Oh yeah, they go. Basically a hybrid will go higher than an iron at the same, distance, right? So you can hit it. So I can hit a hybrid 220 really high, but I can't hit, the 2-iron really high, right? So
Right. Yeah.
the same
That makes
distance.
sense.
So you gotta go look at that. But it's, and don't forget about fairway woods either, to some extent, because fairway woods, excuse me, so I gotta plug my computer in for it, guys. Fairway woods aren't gone away. Hybrids don't replace fairway woods. I hit the ball super high, so I only carry 1 fairway wood. I carry a 14-degree fairway wood. Then I go to actually a 16-degree hybrid. Most people don't hit high enough. They start with a 20-degree hybrid, and they're better off with a 7 wood. So don't forget about the 7 woods at lower speed, because a fairway wood will go even higher at the same distance than a hybrid.
Okay.
It's basically because the shaft's longer, the center of gravity is lower because it's a bigger head, and you get it higher. So you really want to look at those clubs on, what you're trying to do with them. Like I said, I got a 2 hybrid I'm using that mostly off the tee. I want to hit as far as I can. Everything else, I'm trying to stop on the green.
Got it. So
So-
any hybrids that stand out?
There's a lot of good ones. Most popular this year, probably the TaylorMades and Callaways. Ping makes a really forgiving one. Titleist actually does too. It's not a right or wrong. It's kind of what you like to look of. Said there's a lot of good ones. Some are more draw bias than others. That's actually an issue with a lot of hybrids. All of them are somewhat draw bias, so you get a better player that hooks the ball. They're generally going to struggle. There's only a few really fade bias hybrids out there.
Right.
So, kind of got to look at that a little bit as well.
So if you were to pick one or two, the top two would be which?
Probably the TaylorMade Stealth.
I'm asking this for selfish reasons, by the way.
Yeah, I figure as much. Probably do the Stealth, not the Stealth Plus, which is smaller, not forgiving and stuff. Or the Callaway, one of the Callaways, probably Apex or the standard Rogues are really good.
I like that. Okay.
Going
Is that
really
coming-
forgiving, King probably edges out.
Yeah.
Kind of looks nice because it got lots of adjustment, but they're all good. Which one you like to look at the feel of? But getting the right loft, the right distances is really what you're looking for.
Well, because I'm coming back to Scottsdale tonight, so
Okay.
that's the first. That's the first thing I had. That's why I'm asking for selfish reasons.
Okay.
So the Stealth of the Rogue, I like it.
Yeah.
All right, and irons. Anything that stands out? I mean, the irons are there. Some of them are just like they're all.
It
seem
depends on the
really good.
handicap range. Our top sellers, because we generally deal with pretty avid golfers, or average handicaps probably 12, 15 or something like that, lower than most. In irons, TaylorMade 790 is one of the top selling irons, kind of in the middle. That's great. Callaway Apex was another one that's fantastic. Has been for several years, both of those, even the previous models. Titleist has done super well this year. Actually, we saw a lot of Titleist irons. That would be the T200 and T300 mostly. 300
what's the difference? What's the difference between the 200 and 300?
They just get more forgiving as they go up. So there's a 100, you
Okay.
guys on foreplay sometimes, and the 200 is a little more forgiving than that. The 300, and there's a 4 that's a super game improvement.
I mean, I remember the Titleist 912s and 712s. Was it the
Yeah, that's a
912s?
well, yeah.
7?
Yeah, but Titleist has a full range of good clubs too. So, and then Ping makes really good stuff. The Ping new one just came out. The hollow one is also well. And then we sell some PXGs and some other miscellaneous things. They're all pretty good. To some extent, again, it comes down to, I struggle with trying to figure out which iron to play because obviously I can get anything I want for free. And I can't, I don't know which ones I like. They're all pretty good.
Well, you got to try them all.
I
That's
don't
the
like the
problem.
look of offset and rounded, so I don't like the Callaway as much as I like a TaylorMade shape. I'm actually playing a PXG one or a Titleist one. But I'm totally realistic that I could play with a Callaway or anything or any one of these other ones. It's not going to make any difference to my game. It's just what I like to look at.
But what PXG's made a big push for it, like with marketing. Like you can hear like on all these commercials, they claim now that their new iron, the 0311, I think it is. Well, you know it better than I do. The new one, it says it's more forgiving and further than the P790s. Like, so we hear this as consumers, right?
Right.
And then all of a sudden we want to go to, we are seduced and to go get these things. I like.
Yeah, the irons get a little better every year, and the PXG irons are good. I mean, I played PXG irons, on and off for a long time. I just happen to like that shape. Nicolette and Swagger, they're over there from Ping. I just kind of like that shape, but they're good. So are a lot of other ones. I mean, it's not necessarily a winner, so to speak.
The B79
you should be in though, right? So if you're a 30 handicap, I'm not going to give you a blade. I mean, that'll make it harder on yourself. You're going to need to be in the right category of clubs. And I basically put them in 3. There's really better player clubs. Really, blades are kind of gone. Even on tour, there's less than 10% of the guys actually play blades anymore.
Really?
So there's better player clubs, which I put all the Titleist T100s and like the Apex Pros and those kind of things in. That's kind of sub 10 handicap. There's kind of a lot of middle of the road stuff, which would be Callaway Apex, TaylorMade 790s. T200 irons and stuff. And then there's some game improvement stuff, which would be like T300, 400s, some of the Rogue stuff, or, the stealth bigger heads. So you definitely want to be in the right category. Within those categories, a lot of those clubs are pretty good. Which one you pick is kind of up to you on feel and stuff.
Again, the way it looks, the top line. So the P79 is probably, and I'm asking for it again for selfish reasons, that would probably suit a good.
A pretty wide range,
Awesome.
yeah. Yeah, that's kind of, you got some, low single digit handicaps playing those things up to 20 handicaps. That's a pretty big range.
Because it's very forgiving.
Yeah, it's pretty forgiving. I mean, it's not a super game improvement, but it's pretty forgiving, and that's kind of the same category as the Apex, and those are all pretty good clubs.
Yeah, because I want to get some new irons because I'm playing the Callaway DCBs.
That's a pretty good golf club.
Yeah, let's see.
It goes far and it goes high. The only
Yeah.
downside with that club, actually, the head weight's pretty heavy, so you can't go longer with it. But
The only thing I find for me is just a little offset.
yeah, it's a little clunky too. Yeah.
I don't mind the
We don't-
clunking. It's just a little offset. I tend to, I'm
Yeah.
a lefty, so I can tend to, pull them a little bit more than I want to.
Yeah, you could definitely, then less offset would probably help you. If you take
Right.
your misses left as a pull, yeah. As long as you're not
Again,
slicing it when you hit it correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a good one. The only
So
downside,
Pete-
like 790, I would say, is some people don't hit a high enough.
That's why we get fit.
Right. I mean,
'Cause
for
I
me,
want
I
to
hit
hit-
it high, so it's great for me. But,
Yeah.
somebody below, not such a good golf.
But we can get shafts to help, no?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Right.
And like I said, we're going to start doing these probably about a month from now. Monthly podcasts on all this information we're finding, and we're actually going to tell people and rank them
Yeah.
and tell them which ones to look at. And we do all this research and we use it internally for our own fittings. But I don't see any reason I'm not letting everybody know kind of at least what categories all these things go into and which ones are the best in their category, right?
And we're gonna provide links to all of our watchers and all of our database too at Golf Anything to subscribe to your newsletter. I think that's valuable information. I know there's a lot of golf.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to it. It's going to be fun. Hopefully I don't
Yeah.
piss off too many OEMs, but we'll see.
Do fun. Now, how
We're
about
actually going
wedges?
to post the real data, not just, just guessing.
Yeah, I love it. How about wedges? The new Jaws. I see the new Callaway Jaws. That's what I'm using now, and I've always been a Titleist Vokey guy.
Yeah, they look really good. I mean, we used to sell primarily Vokey, but Titleist and TaylorMade and Callaway TaylorMade, Callaway and even Bing, kind of made headroads into those things. There are a lot of good ones. I haven't really looked at them in detail yet, to be honest. I like the new Vokey stuff a lot. But I like the new Jaws, looks great too. I just haven't played with them enough to give you a real.
How about the Cleveland ones? The Cleveland ones you mentioned,
stuff too. Yeah.
because they have a wide
Yeah.
sole. You were talking about the ones with the wide sole. There was one of the
Yeah.
it has a wider sole that a little bit more forgiving. And if you're not that good of a bunker, I think we're
Yeah, we
talking
sell
about
actually a lot of those. It was the Cleveland, they used to call it the CB or cavity back, whatever, but their bigger version, their forgiving one is always super good for high handicaps. Typically high handicaps end up matching the ones that come with a set. So they'll buy, say, the Callaway, whatever, Rogues, and they'll buy the gap wedge and the sand wedge.
Sure.
It does make some sense to use different wedges and specialty wedges. But if you're a high handicap and you're going to use a specialty wedge, use one that's easy to hit, like, the bigger Clevelands and stuff with larger bounces, or the CB, like a Callaway makes one too. It just makes it much easier.
Yeah, and last but not least, putters. Now, I mean, like, we get sold on Scotty Cameron putters, right?
Right.
We get sold on, like, those are the best putters.
Yeah.
Just because there are a lot of tour people, guys that play them, and they have that Circle T putter, and there's this big aftermarket with those putters. And you can
Yeah. There's a bunch of putters out there. Obviously, Callaway's done really well with their, shafts and new thing with the distributing weight differently. And Scotty Cameron, we sell more Scotties than anything by a fair amount. Are they better than any other milled putter? No. Are they good? Yeah, but it's just machining, right? So it's a Bettinardi, it's milled out of a block, or it's a Scotty Cameron, or it's we mill some ourselves, or whatever. If it's milled out of a block, it's milled out of a block. The tolerances on machine shops are more than sufficient to make a putter as good as you can make it. That being said, Titleist has done an unbelievable job marketing Scotty Cameron. And how you can sell a head cover for $500 is beyond my comprehension. Or why a Circle T is $5,000. It's not better than a standard, camera as far as physically how it works, So
Right.
I guess I think we have some egos and some issues, and marketing was a bigger play in putters than probably anything.
Who was the tour player? Jim Furyk. Was it Jim Furyk that went to a store, or was it VJ Singh? I can't remember who it was.
Oh, they've all done.
They went to like it was some golf store, and they bought like a $39 putter, and they ended up winning that
They've
tournament.
all done that. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of them have switch putters here and there. Yeah, they just happen to find one they like, and you gotta remember, tour players, they know what loft and lie they're looking for. So when they're going through the store, playing around with a couple of putters and find one they like, it's not like a 30 handicap going through it blindly, right?
Right.
They kind of know what they're looking for and what they like to feel. So it's not as crazy as it sounds. They went into a store and just grabbed a $39 putter.
I mean, shit. I mean, oh, pardon my language. Like, edit that out their page. I remember like Corey Pavin using that bullseye putter.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like, just like, I mean, I just thought you could if that's the case, then you could win on tour with that. I mean, you could put a 2x4 in his hands, he'd still win.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, you can putt with anything. You don't see a lot of real blade putters anymore out there. I mean, there's obviously advantages, having more forgiving, consistency of distance, and all that stuff. But any putter work. But an answer style putter, and you got to give Karsten Solheim, the credit for that. You can call it a Newport or Newport 2 or whatever from Bettinardi, but it's basically a Scottsdale answer.
Right.
Basic shape.
He pioneered that.
You have a block of steel and you get it all right. It's $100 or $3,000. It's not going to putt any better.
No.
What is important putters though that people don't get is loft. I'll explain that to you really quick here, actually. But loft's really important for how a putter performs. So, we talk about launch monitors for driving. You optimize that launch, you get more distance. Well, optimizing the launch for a putt basically optimizes your consistent distance. So I'll just grab a ball real quick and show you what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah.
It's not talked about a lot. I think people mention it like they ask what your putter loft is, like what's
maybe
loft
maybe
putter,
not.
but not
It's
really.
about driver loft, all right. I mean, what driver loft is 9 or 10 or 11, and basically it's the same philosophy as driver. Not everybody needs an 8-degree driver like I play. Not everybody needs a 12-degree driver. They're all different ones. So for the same reason, not everybody needs a 4-degree loft putter, right? Or a 2-degree loft putter. And they range. Stock puttering lofts range from basically 2 degrees to 4 degrees.
Okay. And what's the purpose of that? Walk us through that.
And this is why. So the ball, when it's sitting on the green, sits in a little bit of a hole, right? Because it's heavier than the grass. So what we're trying to do, if you look at the stripes on the side of this ball, we're trying to lift it out of this hole and get it rolling as fast as we can. Right? It's sitting in a little hole. You play slow greens, you need more loft, or you're deeper into the grass, right? The faster the greens get, the less loft you need to lift it out of the hole. In general. Right? So we're trying to get it rolling as quick as we can. If it bounces, it just, how it hits and where it hits just changes its speed. And you get different distances on the same putt speed, right? So it's not so much that we're trying to optimize distance like we're on a driver. What we're trying to optimize is consistent roll. So the same swing goes the same distance all the time. And if it's bouncing and spinning around, it's not consistent how far it goes. Right. So what we're trying to get is enough loft to lift this out of the hole and get it rolling smoothly as fast as possible. What they call true roll. If you have too much loft on a putter, it gets in the air, starts spinning backwards, and what it lands on has a huge effect. If it lands on a little hill or a downhill, on how far it goes.
So from impact of the putter to the ball, looking for that reaction, whether to get it to roll as soon as possible, or the spin, or just jumps off the face. What's the distance between impact and that event happening?
Somewhere between 6 inches and a couple of feet, even on a long putt, really long putt. But what it did is just trying to get things as roll as smooth as it can. TrackMan does a good job of this. It actually gives you a number, right? And anything above like 85, 90 is really good roll. And what that is percentage of the putt, how much of the time is it rolling?
So off the face, when we hit the putter, like it probably can jump like an inch or 2 or 3
Yeah,
inches
yeah,
or
yeah, you
4.
can't make it
I don't
roll.
know. I'm just,
You can't, it's almost impossible to make it roll immediately, right? To get higher
Okay.
than like 95. You're gonna have to get out of this hole, right? So we can't make it roll immediately because if it be on a perfectly hard surface, we could, but we can't do it, you know. And the other thing is too, is obviously you hit up on it. Same thing with the driver, it lifts it more, so you can get away with lower loft. Like I said, I hit up on it, play an 8-degree driver. Or if you're hitting down on it more, or you're de-lofting it, you need more loft. But there's not a right or wrong. You know, there's tour players out there playing 5 degrees of loft or 6 even. You know, Stan Utley, one of the best putters ever, a good friend of mine. We work with a lot. He's the best putter on tour for 1 million years and teaches putting now. He actually leans the shaft forward, a lot of forward press. So he uses 5 or 6 degrees because at impact, he's more like 2 or 3. The shaft lean forward. You get a guy that looks the opposite direction. Can't remember his name. He won the British Open. Zach Johnson, you know, he's got his hands kind of back here. He's probably got almost no loft on the putter because he's adding loft with the shaft.
yeah, right.
Right. For instance, I use a long putter with only 1 degree of loft on, almost 0. And the reason for that is, I'll show you real quick. The reason I use no loft is because if I hold this putter in the air, because it's got a lot of mass here, the shaft doesn't go 90 degrees. It actually moves this way because the shaft lines up with the center of gravity.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you can see his picture, but if I just hold this thing in the air, it actually leans this way by itself. So
Right.
since it's heavy, I don't have a choice. I'm already adding loft. So I only need, you know, 1 degree additional to the 1 degree I'm already adding to get 2 and hit up on it. So just
Wow.
for the same reason everybody doesn't need a 10-degree loft driver, everybody does not need a 3-degree loft putter, and you should check that.
Isn't that incredible? Of all the equipment that we talked about, just in general, without like, you know, we ended up talking a hell of a lot about putters.
Well, you should be. It's half the game, right?
It's half the game. Wow. Listen, it's amazing. I thank you for your time, and I think the audience has been really. Hopefully, they've learned a lot. I know I have. And tell everyone how they can get a hold of Cool Clubs and how to get fit for any part of their equipment or game.
Yeah, just go to the website. It's the easiest, coolclubs.com. You can kind of look through all locations we have. We don't have a lot of
Okay.
locations, but the ones we do are pretty heavy duty.
So just go to coolclubs.com, and if they want to call anybody, is their phone number?
Yeah, the phone number's out there. But the website's going to give you everything you need. So.
All right, beautiful. Mark, I look forward to seeing you next week. And I look forward to coming to your new podcast studio, and then you know, you're one of my dearest friends. So this has been amazing, and hopefully I can come on your show and talk about shoes.
Okay, that's your area.
Right? I can talk about golf shoes.
Switch it around now.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Yeah, because they go hand in hand. You see, you have equipment, which is golf equipment, but shoes now are becoming part of the golf equipment. Yeah.
It's not something I know a lot about.
Yes, and for everybody there, we'll put some links in the show notes for you guys. For if you guys wanted some more information, how to reach out to me, and then we can answer. But Mark, wonderful, man. I look forward to seeing you next week.
I got to give Paul a little bit of a plug here too, though.
Yeah.
Great place to go. I buy most of my clothing from Paul, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yes, you do. I love it. Yeah, you've gotten a lot of shoes from us. So.
A lot of shoes, a lot of sweaters and skirts.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah. Well, that's good. That's awesome. I'm glad we could be of service to you, man. Mark, thanks again. I'm glad we could be of service to our customers and give them a little bit more information they can make better decisions on, especially come and get fit. Number one.
Yeah. No matter what level you do, at least try to get the best fitting you can kind of afford that makes sense. But do something.
Right. Well, yeah, because like I'm just thinking about the math, the financial, like how much does it cost for a driver with a shaft? How much it costs for irons? You probably got $3,000 or $4,000 average.
Yeah. And like I said, you know, buying something on sale that doesn't work for you is a complete waste of money. So, you know, making sure it works before you buy it is pretty important.
Well, we spend all this time, energy, and effort into playing the game. We spend
Right.
4 hours, on average out there, right? We want to play well. We don't go out there to play bad. That's not my intent when I go to play golf. I don't intend to go play bad. I intend to go play good, right? But it doesn't happen. So that's why the importance of it. Get fit.
Yeah,
No,
definitely.
get fit. If you can get fit at Cool Clubs, you're going to be pleasantly surprised at the experience that you will have, because it is very experiential. It's just not.
It's definitely the most complete fitting out there. I mean, a full fitting is almost 5 hours, so it's, and
Yeah.
I would definitely do it in stages, to be honest, if you're gonna do it.
But just your facilities. I mean, yeah, for anybody who's never been to Cool Clubs in Scottsdale, their HQ, man, you got to go just for. I mean, I think you should have tours just for your
You
facility.
do actually have the main facility, yeah.
Yeah, how cool it really is, and like it's
You're gonna love it.
all it's just jaw dropping. It's just like wow. So, well, once again, coolclubs.com, everyone, go there, check it out. If you have the chance to get fit there, get fit for putter number one. Drivers, we have all your TaylorMades and Callaways that seem to be pretty strong on the equipment side. And thanks again, Mark.
Thanks,
Have
John.
yourselves a great day, and take care. Take
Yeah.
care, everybody.
Bye.